For the last 2 years, I've been doing this thing of trying to write every day. And the reason why I started this habit is because before that I wasn't writing. I was plotting and I was daydreaming about stories, but actually doing the writing, not so much. So that's why when I set out to build this habit, it was really all about just doing it and not focusing on whether the writing was any good or usable or even readable sometimes, but just doing it consistently every day. And now I'm at the point where I trust myself that I will continue consistently writing, where it's become such a normal habit that it's no longer an issue. And that's why I now want to focus more on what I'm writing and the quality of what I'm writing and focus more on the skill itself rather than just the habit itself. But because I've been taking this discovery draft approach to my writing in the last 2 years, I've accumulated a large amount of pages of story material. It's not necessarily story, it's more like a lot of summaries, backstories and some story in there. And it's not really a first draft, it's really just the first starting point that I have for my story. And that's why in this video I want to focus on 5 methods on how to get started with organizing your discovery draft if you have something similar as I do, and turn it into the first framework of a first draft. And also, as a little bonus to say thank you for 100 subscribers, I have nested 2 ninja tips somewhere in this video that should make it extra easier for you to apply these methods. So look out for them. Alright, so let's get started with method number 1. So this first method is something that is fairly intuitive when you have something similar like me, a mess, and it's something that, funny enough, I also saw Sanderson do in an outline form. So he does this for his outlines, but basically you can do the same thing for your discovery draft, which is to organize it per plot lines. So what you do is you get an overview of all the plot lines that you have and list the main plot lines as main headings, and then for the subheadings list them as the key plot points or the turning points, so that you basically have an overview of what exactly happens in this storyline. And so that's what I did. I started to organize all my story material according to the plot lines, and within the plot lines it's chronological. The main idea behind this approach is that you have an overview of all the plot lines that you have in your story and that you can keep track of them. But then also, as you list them like that, it helps you to get an overview of how much material you have per plot line in comparison to the other plot lines. So with the story that I'm writing right now, not the chosen one, I am very unbalanced in terms of plot line material. So the main character conflict, internal conflict kind of plot lines, they're figured out, and that's the main material that I've got. Whereas the overall story it takes place in, this whole chosen one aspect, is still very vague and hardly existent at this point. So that's something that this method very clearly shows you, right? If you have like a ton of character conflict plotline but none of the umbrella plot, then maybe it's not an umbrella plot but just setting, right? And you want to focus on the character conflict. So this method could help you to figure out what story it is that you actually want to tell and just mainly focus on that. But most of all, this is the starting point. If you are confused, if you have a discovery draft that is fairly messy, just like mine, start with organizing the plot lines just to see what you've got. Right, then method number 2 is more applicable if your discovery draft isn't as extensive, or if you prefer to work within the document itself. So if you don't want to add another document but just want to basically do the changes within your existing document, this next method could be very useful for you, and that's the highlight method. And since we're speaking of working in document, here's the first ninja tip, which is to work with versions. So you know how important it is to back up your writing, right? But this approach is a bit more systematic in terms of every time you want to make grander alterations to your discovery draft or your existing draft, basically save it as another version. So this first draft that you have is version 01, right? And now that you want to start reorganizing it, first save it as version 02 and do the whole reorganization within this second version. And the whole point here is that if you make a lot of changes, especially when it comes to structure or altering scenes, and you don't like them, you still have the raw material. But also, in the grander scheme of writing your story, you would have like this evolution of how it came together, right? So you have like the first draft, which is like this raw material, this whole just unreadable stuff, and then maybe, don't know, version 25 would be like your finished book actually, and you can basically see how it came together. Okay, so back to the highlight method. You can adapt this method according to your own project and what your needs are for it. For example, if I apply it, I could go the same way as I go with the first method, which is per plot line. So in that case, basically I assign a color for each plot line, and the whole thing is about going through the discovery draft and highlighting each paragraph where it belongs in what plot line. But you can also go according to story elements, for example. So if you want to see character arc versus key plot points versus theme, for example, you assign colors to each of them, right? And you go through the document and you highlight each part. And this method, more so than the previous one, will give you an overview of how much the different story elements play into each other. So if you have like a lot of red because all the key points are red and they all happen one after the other, that could help you figure out, okay, maybe I want to nest like a character arc moment in there somewhere. So just to give it breathing room and also to have like play into each other, right? So this method is really very visual and very useful for getting an overview of your first draft, of your discovery draft, turning it into a first draft. It's basically an outlining method for people who don't like to outline. Tying into outlining, this is method number 3, which is to reverse engineer an outline. For me, the reason why I started with discovery writing, not the chosen one, wasn't because I hate outlining or it doesn't fit my style. It was really just because the story started with the character and with this kind of vague idea of writing the story from the perspective of a not chosen one. But I didn't have anything else than that, and because of that I couldn't fill out an outline basically. So I did try a lot of methods actually in the beginning, and it didn't feel right. It basically killed the enthusiasm that I had for the story, which started with the character. So that's why I started with the discovery writing. If you feel similar in terms of you actually like outlining, you just couldn't apply it, this method could be the right one for you, because it's really just take the existing material that you have now that you have something to work with and apply it to a outlining method and start filling in an outline template. So it doesn't matter what approach you take when it comes to outlining. You can use whatever method you like best or whatever template you've got. It's really just about having an outline, creating an outline now that you have basically the starting points to do so. Personally, I am actually a big fan of the outlining method from Anatomy of Story. I think it's very intuitive and a very comprehensive guide to creating an outline for your story. Or what you could do is use Sanderson's ready outline for his Skyward book, which he has on his website. So if you're interested in that, because I only just did the Sanderson lectures, I have the link where exactly on the website it is linked down below for your convenience. If you just want to basically have a template to fill in, use that, because it's got all the key points in there that you would need to figure out what an outline needs, right? So it's kind of like the easiest way to get started. And how this method works is really just, once again, you read through your discovery draft and you basically fill out the template, the outline, according to the method that you use while reading through it. The main point of this method is really more about figuring out what is the story overall. So you're now at this point where you've done a lot of brainstorming, writing, you know your character maybe, and now you want to get a sense of what you've got and where are still a lot of plot holes or holes in terms of information that you're missing. So that's why this method is the best for that, because it gives you a very comprehensive overlook of everything that you've already created within your story. And whether you then want to go and basically work with this outline and keep it the same way that you would if you had started with an outline, or if you want to just discard it because now you know where are the holes in your story that you need to fill out, both of those approaches work. So you can do this next method in several different ways. Whether you want to use a tool like storyboarding or mind mapping or more common index cards, it works for all of them. The method itself is about visualizing your key story moments. For this, what you want to do is you want to focus on the key plot points that you've got. And basically what I do when applying this method is that I went through what I've got so far and I identified the key plot moments that are the turning points that I know have to happen, even if I didn't know all the details yet in how they play out, just kind of like the vague idea. And more so, I looked for events that I knew are fixed. So all the stuff where I'm like, yeah, this is going to happen, this is part of the story, I know this is going to be exactly playing out as I have it right now, right? Some of that stuff I've got, and I basically started from those moments because I liked to take the approach of basically filling in the missing stuff based on the things that I've already have. So it's kind of like a bit of a Sudoku approach where you have like the fixed numbers and you fill in the rest according to the rules, right? So it's the same thing. I'm just looking for the fixed stuff that I've already have in my story, make those the key moments, put them on index cards, lay them out in chronological order and see what is missing. Again, it gives you an overview of what you've got so far in terms of your story and makes it visible basically where you're at and what is missing. And since this method is really all about visualizing your story in some grander scheme, what you can do is you can also apply it in terms of, instead of index cards, use pictures that represent basically the moments that you have imagined. And that, for some people, that helps a lot more than writing stuff down, right? Because it has like the energy and the feel attached to that you want to give your story. And this method, just like the outlining method, I would recommend, especially if you're at this point where you've done a lot of backstorying and character development and figuring out setting stuff. So you have a lot of material to work with and you really want to just zero in on how much of what you've got so far is actual story that's going to be told to the reader, right? So that you have an overview of how much is actually missing that is useful and not just all the pieces that you need to create more of a story in terms of fleshing it out, right? So what are the key pieces that are missing? This method is the easiest to do that, in my opinion. So before we move on with the final method, this is the final ninja tip. If you're anything like me and you're unjustifiably lazy when it comes to rereading your own stories material, get a text-to-voice software. So basically get a software that reads your text to you so that you don't have to read it yourself. Personally, I really like doing this because it makes it much more efficient to reread it. It's faster and you can basically listen to it being read to you while you do your corrections or your highlighting or whatever. And also it's just really cool to have your story read to you. So that's my recommendation, because we do a lot of rereading in these methods, right? To go back through our drafts and stuff, makes it much easier if somebody reads it to you. So the final method is the method that you would want to apply if you have a discovery draft that is much cleaner than what I've been showing you so far. Because if you want to apply this method, it's a very comprehensive method and it's probably much easier to do if it's already somewhat in order or more story than story material. So the method is to basically analyze your manuscript as you read through it. With this method, you read through your entire discovery draft and take notes as you read through it. So personally, I liked to do it in document, again with the versions, and just make comments according to what comes to mind. And here again, you can alter the method according to your needs and where you're at with your draft. Either you could go per, basically, some people like to read through their draft several times and each time take specific notes. So first read through is all about characters and just all the notes on characters, on their arcs, on their personalities and stuff like that. And then the second read through is just focus on plot and does the plot work. You know, that could be useful if you have like a story where it's very character centric and you really love your characters, but the plot seems a bit implausible. It's just kind of like it needs to be there so that the characters have these moments that they should experience, right? So if you have something like that, that could be useful to break it up into different sessions so that you can focus on each element on its own and basically identify if an element is very weak. So that's one approach. Another approach is really just to, similar to the highlighting method, assign basically colors or comment functions to story elements. So character, plot points, theme, setting stuff, and on each, while reading through it, take the notes that come to mind, how you as a fresh reader would experiencing it. And it's really, this whole method is very similar to what you would do later down the road, right? When you have like a final draft stage and you're really just going through it once again, right? In this session, it's really about figuring out the story. So it's not about how well is it written or should I alter some detail. It's not about that. It's really about more, okay, so I kind of like the essence of this scene, but it doesn't make sense that this character would say that. So can I take this scene and have another character say that, for example? Kind of those kind of notes. It's all about find the story within all the stuff that you've written so far and note down how you can bring it out more. Okay, so this is it. These are the methods that I've got for you. If you have any others, please share. Always very appreciated. If you're interested in the video that I talked about building this whole writing everyday habit, you can go here and check that out. And other than that, I will see you next time.